Hi, my name is Kelsey Starkoff,
And I'm Elaine Gonzalez.
and today we're going to be presenting to you on the direct method of language teaching. So, the direct method was first introduced by Francois Gouin in 1880, and he was a Frenchman who was a scholar, and he really wanted to learn German. So, he went to Germany to try to learn German, and he tried all these different ways using grammar instruction, using textbooks, he memorized dictionaries, and everything he did, he couldn't learn German and he couldn't master it, and he failed in all his attempts. So when he returned to France, he saw that his 3-year-old nephew had already fluently acquired the language. So he was really interested to see that a 3-year-old could become fluent in a language without knowing how to read and write. But he couldn't become fluent in German, and he did know how to read and write. So this led to his ideas that led to the direct method. And so Francois Gouin believed that in order to learn a language, you have to be able to use the language. And so his beliefs later were adapted by L. Saveur and F. Frank, and they contributed to the direct method based on their beliefs that it's based on natural language learning principles. And the direct method was finally finalized in the early 1900s, and it became widely known in the United States through its use by Saveur and also Maximilian Berlitz in commercial language schools. So the early 1900s was really when we saw kind of the debut of the direct method in the U.S. and in language schools.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about the theoretical base of the direct method. This method is based on the belief that it is a natural way to learn a language through acquisition. The direct language method aims to teach the way you learned your first language. The target language is always the primary focus. You do not speak in English. For example, if I were teaching Spanish, I would speak directly in Spanish and I would not use no translation. And that is the overall rule in the direct method, that there is no translation allowed. So the students are pretty much listening to the target language. Another thing is that students convey meaning directly from the target language, and grammar is taught inductively with no explicit explanation. So it's right through, so it's like no explanations for grammar.
The founding idea of the direct method is that it's easier to learn a second language without any use of the first language. So, for example, if I was teaching French, I would teach solely in French because the belief is that if I used English to translate back and forth, that would confuse the students even more and make it more difficult for them to learn their second language, French. And so materials that support this direct method are authentic sources. And this could include anything in the target language, including readings, movies, film, music, anything that is authentic and that is slowly presented in the target language. And the direct method is considered more of a traditional method nowadays because it's very structured by the teacher and it's all teacher controlled. So the direct method is everything that the teacher is presenting, and it's not very student centered. So that's why it's considered more of a traditional method by today's terms.
Now, we're going to talk about the instructional application in the classroom. There are certain practices and techniques used within this method. These techniques are focused on helping the learner acquire the L2 through mainly listening and speaking. Traditional techniques of the direct method include never translate, always demonstrate. For example, if I wanted to tell the students, okay, stand up, I would demonstrate that to them. I would not translate it for them. If they don't understand, I would demonstrate. So it's never translate. Another one would be never explain, act. It's another form of demonstrating. For example, there was a boy walking down the street and he fell down. And if the students don't understand that, you can go, oh, I'm walking down the street, up, he fell. That's acting. Never imitate mistakes. Correct. Make mistakes. Another one would be speak normally and naturally. Don't be like, do you understand me? Just Speak normally and naturally. They're not dumb. It's really hard to understand.
So the goal of how we implicate the direct method is that we want to make it as natural for the students as possible, and that's why we want to speak normally and naturally and only speak correct and not imitate any mistakes, because we want to make it as similar to an immersion process as we can. So some tools frequently used in the direct method are realia, and these are really useful for when you're teaching vocabulary. For example, if you were teaching a lesson on fruit, you would bring in the real fruit to model, this is the fruit, this is the word. So if I had an apple, I would say une pomme, and I wouldn't say anything else in English. You show what it is, and you say what the word is in the target language. Also, music is a really good tool to use for the direct method because it's all input in the target language that the students are acquiring. Similar to music are videos, because that's giving students an audio and visual support in the target language. Something that a lot of teachers use just naturally is body language and gesticulation, and that's a really easy way that you can get your points across, especially when you're demonstrating things like verbs or telling a story about what happened. The teacher can use their body language, their movements, their gestures, everything like that to convey that to the students in the target language. And finally, something that more teachers are moving into are authentic technology sources. We just read an article about students using a video game totally in the target language, and that was one way of input that they were getting to help them acquire the target language.
Now we're going to talk about some disadvantages of the direct method. Some of the disadvantages are not enough time to learn the way a first language was acquired.
So it's really difficult for teachers in a foreign language classroom to create a situation that's similar to the way that we learned our first language. And that's the overall goal of the direct method, is to make it as similar to our first language learning process as we can. But that's really hard for teachers to imitate in a classroom. Another disadvantage of the direct method is that it's really hard to replicate the immersion experiences that the direct method aims to provide. For example, it's very difficult for teachers to provide a situation in which students would be immersed in the language, such as they would be if they were visiting a foreign country.
Another would be rejects printed word, but these students already know how to read and write. So that would be like they reject the word. Do you want to explain a little bit further?
Yeah. So the direct method really rejects the printed word, and it focuses mainly on oral and oral sources, listening and speaking. And so it doesn't focus a lot on reading and writing. And that's kind of a disadvantage for our students, because at the age that we're teaching, our students already know how to read and write. And the direct method isn't incorporating those skills that they already have. So that's kind of a disadvantage, is it's not focusing on skills that our students already have.
Another one would be it's difficult for teachers to maintain their own materials and their own creativity and ability required. So it's like it requires so much for the teacher to maintain their creativity for the direct method.
Exactly. The direct method takes so much planning and creativity to create a real life situation that it's very difficult for teachers to achieve. And the direct method is definitely going out of style, and it's being replaced by more contemporary methods such as TPRS, the audio-lingual method. So even though we see elements of it today in today's classrooms, it is being replaced by other methods.
Well, I think that's all that we have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for your time.
Okay.
Hi again. Now we're going to do our micro teach. First of all, I'm going to start off saying our materials in Spanish, and they're going to be school supplies, and then later
I'm going to do the same lesson modeling the direct method and using our school supplies in French.
Okay, to get started. Okay, primero quiero que escuches y luego repite. Yo voy a hacerlo una vez, ¿ok? Hoja. Libro. Pluma. Lápiz. Borrador. Calculadora. Marcador. Cuaderno. Ok. Ahora quiero que escuches y repitas. Hoja.
Hoja.
Libro.
Libro.
Pluma.
Pluma.
Borrador.
Borrador.
Lápiz.
Lápiz.
Calculadora.
Calculadora.
Es muy difícil decir esa palabra. Marcador.
Marcador.
Cuaderno.
Cuaderno.
Muy bien.
Okay, now I'm going to model a similar lesson using the direct method in French. D'accord, maintenant je vous présente les choses nécessaires pour l'école. Et la première fois, écoutez à moi. Et la deuxième fois, répétez après moi. D'accord? Alors, le papier, un livre, un cahier, un stylo, une gomme, une calculatrice et un crayon. Alors maintenant, je dis les mots et vous écoutez et répétez après moi. Le papier,
La papier.
un livre,
Un livre.
un cahier,
Un cahier.
un stylo,
Un stylo.
une gomme,
Une gomme.
une calculatrice,
Una calculatrice.
un crayon.
Un crayon.
Très bien! Okay, so those were two little micro teaches that we had to demonstrate the direct method to you. And you'll notice that we focused on speaking and listening. There was no writing or reading involved, and everything we did was in the target language.
Thank you.